So this morning we are continuing our series that we are calling The Greatest Sermon Ever. Not because I'm preaching the greatest sermon ever, but because the sermons I'm preaching are based on the greatest sermon ever, which is a Sermon on the Mount. And today's installment begins with a public service announcement. Okay, so bear with me. If you have never had your house tested for radon, I strongly recommend that you have done so. That you have it done. Here's what happened. Years ago, someone suggested to me that I test our house for radon, our house here at the church, at the parsonage here. And at first I kind of thought, well, it's not that big of a deal. Why bother? Well, maybe eventually if I get around to it. I treated it like it was a very small deal because it seems so. I mean, you can't see radon, you can't smell it, and so it's not something there really noticeable. Then, later on, someone else made the same suggestion, and I began to research. I found out that radon is the second leading cause of lung cancer. And so I decided to order a test kit and have it tested. They say that your radon level, whatever the picocules, whatever it is they measure it in, should be between like 1.5 and 2.5, maybe 3, something like that. They say anything over 4 is dangerous and you need to do something about it. When I tested, we found out we were like 12.5, something like that. It was the equivalent of everyone in our house smoking 25 cigarettes a day, basically. Had the same effect on our lungs. When I was talked to the board, of course, they were very generous. They said, yes, absolutely, go ahead, we'll get it fixed. So it's taken care of. When I was calling around and getting estimates to see who could fix the problem, I talked to one lady. They were going to send someone out to do the estimate. She said, now, where do you live? I said, we live in Galax. She said, oh, yeah, I bet you have radon problems living there. Apparently, it's a big issue here in the area. So, if you've never had it tested, I would recommend you have it tested. I say all that, though, to get to the point. When I first heard about this, it was not that big of a deal in my mind. It seemed small. It seemed harmless. Well, maybe it's a little high, but it's nothing too dangerous, nothing too bad. But the more I looked into it and the more I studied on what was going on, I realized that it was capable of doing a lot more damage. What was seemingly small could do quite a bit of damage. Now, I say all that to get the point across that there are a number of things that are seemingly small, that don't seem to be that big of a deal, seem to be regular or commonplace, that can actually be quite damaging to us. Jesus taught about a number of things like this in the Sermon on the Mount, and the first one he spoke about is what we're talking about today, anger. You see, anger causes much greater damage than what we realize. From the passage that Robin just shared with us, I want to look at what Jesus said about anger, and I think we can see that there are at least 4 serious dangers to dealing with anger that we might not otherwise realize. And I want to talk about these 4 dangers today. And the first danger is this: anger hurts you. When you are angry, you suffer. We don't always realize it. It seems like a small deal. Well, I'm just a little upset. But it can actually be quite dangerous. You know, Jesus said that everyone who is angry with his brother is liable to judgment. He taught that anger taken farther and farther is more serious and deserving of worse and worse punishment. Anger hurts us in a number of ways. Proverbs 25:28 says, a man without self-control is like a city broken into and left without walls. You know, in that time, cities had walls around them for military defense, to keep the people safe. Well, anger essentially tears down our protection around us. Now, there are different words in the Greek language of the New Testament for anger. There's a number of different words. They refer to different kinds of anger. For example, there's one like means something like frustration. That's not the one Jesus used here. It's a very minor thing. There's a word called thumos. And that's not the one Jesus uses here, but there's something called thumos, and that's like a very quick, flaring anger. You know, something happens and instantly, you get real mad all of a sudden. You know that feeling, right? I mean, we all have buttons that can be pushed, and certain things just make us mad, and then it subsides really quick, and we have control. It's not an issue. You know, you can't always help how you feel. If you feel anger, you can't always control that. Now, if you do something wrong because of that feeling, then it's bad, obviously. But you can't always help how you feel at times. And some anger just comes on, someone pushes the right button, something happens, and it's just a flare, but then you have control, you can handle it. That's not bad in and of itself. Okay? Let me share with you guys, I'll be vulnerable here. I'll share with you guys one of my personal buttons. Okay? I don't know why it is, but anytime that I hit my head on something, I just instantly rage inside. It just makes me mad. Now, it goes away pretty quick too, but I just get real mad instantly. And I don't understand why. If I'm in a small space and I turn and hit my elbow on something, it doesn't do it. If I stub my foot, it doesn't do it. If I walk around a corner and I don't judge it right and I hit my shoulder, it doesn't do it. But for some reason, when something is hanging low or something and I hit my head on it, it pushes my buttons and I get that thumos, that instant bit of rage. That's okay. I can't help how I feel. Right now I can help what I do when I'm angry, but I can't help how I feel. I really think at times our entire society was built and designed by short people. Because I hit my head on things a lot. Some of you taller people are nodding your heads and smiling because you know exactly what I'm talking about. And some of you short people are sitting there thinking, I don't know, everything seems nice and cozy. I got lots of room. And you probably think airplane seats are comfortable too, don't you? Okay, do you see what's happening? That initial anger that was there and gone, that thumos, now I'm holding on to it. And I'm thinking more about it and I'm brooding over it. And now it's becoming a different kind of anger. It's becoming a type of anger that the Greeks called orge. And that's the one that Jesus used here. When he said, whoever is angry with his brother is liable to judgment. Orge. It refers to an ongoing anger. It's something that's lasting, something that's brooding, something that's controlling. You have this when you hold on to a grudge and nurture it. And that's very, very dangerous to ourselves. There's spiritual danger because this type of anger is wrong. It puts a problem with our relationship with God. That harms us. It hurts us relationally. Anger separates us from our brothers and sisters. Proverbs 15:18 says, a hot-tempered man stirs up strife, but he who is slow to anger quiets contention. A person who lets anger rule, there's problems all around them. They cause problems. That hurts them as well. We don't really think about it very much, but there are physical consequences to anger. Dr. Don Colbert, he's a medical doctor, wrote a book called Deadly Emotions. Understand the mind-body-spirit connection that can heal or destroy you. And he is a doctor who began to look not only at the physical ailments of patients and people. He began to study into what their attitudes, what their emotions were as well. And he found that there is a strong connection between negative emotions of all kinds and health problems. For example, people who struggle with anger, who insist on being angry, they can have greater risk of hypertension, coronary artery disease, migraine headaches, fibromyalgia, chronic back pain, and there's a number of other things that may be related. Anger hurts us. I went on a mission trip once to Mexico. We went to actually this church that was in the slums of Juarez, Mexico. Now, this was back when it was a little bit safer before all the drug wars and everything were so dangerous. But I went to the slums of Juarez, Mexico. And when we got to this church where we were working, the missionary warned us. They said, okay, right next door to the church, there's an older woman. Just stay away from her. Don't try to talk to her. Don't go over to see her. Just stay away from the woman. And it's bad when the missionaries tell you that. We had some run-ins with her while we were there. She was probably the angriest person I have ever met in my entire life. When we didn't have things to do, when we just wanted some downtime, we would go out into the street and we'd kick a soccer ball back and forth, for fun. One day, me and a friend were out there kicking a ball back and forth, and we were in the street. We weren't there at the house. We were in the street in front of our house, and she came out and saw us and started yelling, and we couldn't understand what she was saying, but I'm sure she wasn't saying anything good, and she was just mad. Didn't know why. Just mad because we were there in the street. And my friend I was kicking the soccer ball with was kind of clueless. He just looked at her and said, I don't speak Spanish. And I said, no, say yo no hablo español, and he couldn't say it, and so we just left and left. She was just filled with so much rage. You ever meet people like that? They're miserable. Regardless of what their physical health is, spiritually, they can't be healthy spiritually. Mentally, emotionally, they're miserable people because that's what anger does. It hurts us. That's the first danger of dealing with anger like this. The second danger is that anger leads to wrong actions. Anger is dangerous because of how it affects what we do. Jesus gives a description now of a person who's not just angry, but apparently their anger goes on to lead to bad actions. It says they insult someone else, which is bad enough, but then they go on and gives a very specific insult, which most translations will put something like "you fool." A very specific insult that's probably paramount to slander, to trying to harm someone's good name. When you're angry, you're not thinking rationally. And usually when you're angry, you're only thinking about yourself, and you're bound to make bad judgment calls at that point. Now, I feel like I do need to say, not all anger is bad. There is such a thing as righteous anger. Jesus got angry, but please note what he got angry about. All throughout his ministry, his opponents, the Pharisees, they would berate him, they would attack him, they would slander him, they would try to contradict him at every single turn. And we don't see Jesus getting very angry about that. Finally, when he lets it all out, when he expresses his real complaint with the Pharisees, you know what he's mad at them about? It's not because of all the bad things they did to him. It's because they were leading other people astray. The anger was not based on him. It was based on doing what was right. He was angry when he came in and found people selling in the temple, basically misusing the temple. It was disrespectful to God. Again, he wasn't mad because they directly offended him. He was mad because they were disrespectful to God. Now, because there is such a thing as righteous anger, it doesn't mean all anger is right, though. When anger is in defense of self, and that is a big blanket statement, but I will say, when our anger is in defense of self, usually it's going to be wrong. That person hurt me. Well, they said something that offended me. Here's the tough thing to understand. Being a Christian is about anyone but you. It's about, first and foremost, honoring God. Anger is inappropriate and dangerous because it can produce the opposite effect. James 1:19 says, "Know this, my beloved brothers, let every person be quick to hear, slow to speak, slow to anger. For the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God." Anger is so dangerous because it is bound to affect our actions. It will produce the opposite of the righteousness that God wants in our lives. And I'll tell you, it doesn't just hurt you, and it doesn't just hurt the person you're angry at. A lot of times it hurts the people that you care the most for. This is called the kick the cat technique. Have you ever heard of this before? Kick the cat technique. Imagine that there's a man who owns a business. He wakes up in the morning, happy enough, one morning, getting ready to go to work, but his wife is in a bad mood. And he gets up and walks in the kitchen and says, "Hey, honey, what's for breakfast?" She says, "Why do you want me to make your breakfast? I'm not your slave. You make your own breakfast." And she just lets him have it. Now, who's in a bad mood? Both of them are, right? He's in a bad mood too. Well, he goes to work angry because of the way he was treated. And he finds one of his employees made a small, very minor mistake in some of his work. So he just lets it rip on him. He says, "How could you do that? I don't pay you to mess up my business. Why do you have to ruin everything?" Now who's angry? The employee's angry. The employee goes home. His wife says, "Honey, how was your day at work?" He says, "My day was horrible. Why do you always have to ask me how my day?" And he makes a huge deal out of it. Now she's angry too. And she walks back to the house and she passes their daughter's bedroom and she sees that it's not clean. And she snatches up her daughter. "How dare you not clean your room? I told you to keep that room clean. You're supposed to do that." Now the daughter's angry too. And so she stomps off back to clean her room. And on the way, the family cat crosses in front of her. And that is the worst possible thing that cat could have done at that time. Because when she sees that cat crossing, she just kicks it. Lets it all out on that poor cat. That's called the kick the cat technique. You pass anger, you pass frustration on to people that don't deserve it, that have nothing to do with it. Proverbs 14:17 says, "A man of quick temper acts foolishly, and a man of evil devices is hated." Anger is going to lead to wrong actions. I came home from work the other day, and I had had a rough day, and I was in a bad mood. And Bree and Kai were already home at that point, and Bree was in the kitchen fixing food or something like that, and I was really mad. I was upset about stuff. So I went back to the bedroom, and I started to get changed into more comfortable clothes. And do you know what my wife did? While she was in the kitchen and I was back in the bedroom, you know what she did? She said, "Hey, Nate." Can you believe her? And I was in such a bad mood. Now, I'll say, I should have said, "Yes, dear." Instead, I said, "What?" That wasn't good. To her credit, she could put it out right there. She said, "Never mind." Went back about her work. Didn't get mad. Didn't take it out on anybody else. Didn't pass along. Didn't take it out on Kai. Didn't take it out on the dog. Didn't take it out on the cat. She could have taken it out on the cat if she wanted to. I wouldn't mind. I don't like our cat anyway. But she didn't take it out on anybody. To her credit, she could put it down. But you know, anger, it's going to make you do something wrong. It's going to make you hurt somebody. Like it did with me. Shouldn't have done that. Now, I went and apologized to her afterwards, and she was understanding of it. But that's the natural result of anger, is wrong action. So, anger hurts ourselves. It leads us to do some things that are wrong. Here's another danger. Anger harms our relationship with other people. Now, Jesus gives a couple of scenarios here. In one, a man is taking a sacrifice to the altar at the temple, and he remembers that his brother is offended. He's done something wrong to his brother. We assume, because of the context, out of anger, he's done something wrong to someone else. And so he's supposed to leave and go back and make peace with him. Jesus gives another scenario where two men are going to court together. We can assume, again, there was some sort of wrong done out of anger, and you're supposed to make peace with him again. Relationships are torn apart because of anger, because of the angry actions of some people. Anger separates us from others. Right? Now, I will say this. Some separation, some division from other people is necessary, or is acceptable for the right reason. There is only one reason that is acceptable to be divided from other people. And that is if that reason is Jesus Christ. Jesus warned us that He came not to bring peace but a sword. He said that the result of Him preaching, giving people righteousness, that would cause people to turn on others. There would be some controversy. Now, that can't always be helped. It's not ideal, but it's the nature of the world. But when a person refuses to be united to you because of Christ, well, you can't help that. But when the problem of division between people comes because of me, all of a sudden you have an issue. Well, I'm mad, so I'm not going to talk to you for a while. Well, I'll get you back for what you did to me. That's when division can be helped, and that's when it's inappropriate. Romans 12:18 says, "If possible, so far as it depends on you, live peaceably with all." But you know, anger leads us to wrong attitudes and to wrong actions that separate us from other people. You know, Jesus came not only to unite people to God, but to unite people to each other. One of the biggest controversies in the early church, and I'm talking for the first probably 50 to 75 years of church history, one of the biggest controversies was, what are we going to do when all these Gentile Christians want to be a part of our church? You had this big division between Jewish Christians and Gentile Christians, and the question was, how do we handle this? And finally, it was handled. Christians all simply came together under one church, under one head. And you know, that was a powerful testament to the power of Jesus Christ, that these two drastically different groups could be united. That's what Christ does. He brings people together. Anger separates them. It has the opposite effect. Proverbs 29:22 says, "A man of wrath stirs up strife, and one given to anger causes much transgression." He stirs up strife. He divides people. He tears people apart. I had a good friend who struggled a little bit with anger. We went to high school together, still friends today, and he's maybe a little better now, but he used to struggle with anger so much. Anything could make him mad, and he could just go off and rant about it and throw these huge fits. One day, when we were, like juniors or seniors in high school, we were sitting at the lunch table having lunch, and something came up about a class we had, about our art appreciation class. Now, I didn't like that class. He didn't like that class, but he was mad about it. He was mad because he had to take that class, and he made this big fit about it. When something came up, he started saying, "That is the dumbest class I've ever taken in my life. I don't know why I have to sit through those sort of things." And he just went on about how useless it all was. About the time he finished, I can imagine it from his perspective, an arm came around It was right before Christmas. Had a little Christmas tree-shaped cupcake, his little baby cookie, right there beside him. And he turned around, and it was the art teacher who right there who did that. She had heard the whole thing. There was no way to deny it. And so he could just say, I'm sorry. Now, she thankfully was very thick-skinned. She said, it's okay, Merry Christmas. And she gave it to him, and she was giving it to all of her art appreciation students, all these little cupcake things, and she happened to be right there. And we kind of laughed about it at the time, and I got a cupcake, which was great, but they were very, if she had not been so thick-skinned, that anger would have led to a major division, a major problem. I imagine there were strains in the relationship after that anyway. Anger tends to separate us from other people, tends to lead us to wrong things that hurt others. All right, so anger hurts ourselves. Anger leads us to wrong actions. Anger hurts our relationship with others. And there's one more huge, dangerous thing about anger I want to talk about, and that's this. Anger harms our relationship with God. Anger harms our relationship with God. It's pretty simple from everything that follows. Jesus spoke of the man who takes an offering, we assume probably a guilt offering, to ask for forgiveness, to the temple. He takes it there to be sacrificed. He's supposed to leave it there and first go and be reconciled to his brother before he actually offers the sacrifice. Now that gives us a very important principle we have to understand, and that is that our relationship with others affects our relationship with God. Any wrong that we commit, we call sin. Now, sin is what drives a wedge between us and God. Now, Jesus taught that being angry, holding a grudge, that's wrong in and of itself, and that obviously hurts our relationship with God. But anytime we sin against anyone else, we also sin against God. Now, yes, we can do wrong things to God without directly hurting other people, but you can't hurt someone else without hurting God as well. All sin is sin against God. We've already seen that God desires that we be united with each other, that we live together. 1 John 1:7 says, if we walk in the light as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, cleanses us from all sin. There's such a close relationship there between our relationship with each other and our relationship with God. If a father were to buy, say, a toy or something for his two children, he may very well have the intent that that toy is supposed to bring them together, teach them to share, help them build their relationship. But if instead they spend all their time fighting over whose turn it is, trying to take it from each other, it becomes a big controversy in the family. They take what that father intended for good, and they let it separate them, and they fight and argue and divide, and they don't realize that in the process they probably hurt their father pretty bad. Well, in the same way, when we let anger divide us against each other, we disregard God's design for the life He's given us, the blessings He's given us, and the salvation that He gives us. We just disregard all of that, and we hurt Him in the process. So, I would say that anger can be a pretty damaging thing. Before I close, I just want to give a few specific pieces of application here. Let's talk about some practical application for dealing with anger. First off, if you have wronged someone else because you were angry, maybe you were angry in response to a wrong that they did to you, you need to understand that that is not a good excuse. Ephesians 4, verse 26 says, be angry and do not sin. Do not let the sun go down on your anger, and give no opportunity to the devil. If you have harmed someone else because of your anger, then you need to ask them for forgiveness, and you need to ask God to forgive you because you've sinned against Him as well. But let's say you're on the other end of the equation. If you struggle with anger because someone else has harmed you, you struggle with anger because you have been wronged, there's a number of things you can do. That's very difficult to control, isn't it? When anger is right there, when it's a controlling emotion, it's very difficult to handle it. There's a few things you can do to help. First off, consider that sometimes when we are angry, it is rooted in another sinful attitude. Maybe you're angry because someone offended you. Well, maybe the reason it makes you so angry is because you had an overinflated ego anyway. Maybe you were being awful prideful, and when they insulted you, it tore that down, and you're mad because they hurt your pride. Well, that wasn't right in the first place. But also, when someone has made you angry, you can go to them and you can speak to them one-on-one, clearly, calmly, respectfully. If they listen, then that's great. If not, at least you've done the right thing. You've done what you need to do. Also, when someone has made you angry, has done something wrong to you, do not retaliate. 1 Peter 2:23 says, when Jesus was reviled, he did not revile in return. When he suffered, he did not threaten, but continued entrusting himself to him who judges justly. And finally, when you are struggling with anger, keep your mind on the positive. Do not let anger dominate your thoughts. Look at the person the way that Jesus would, with love. While Jesus was still being crucified, while he was still on the cross, he asked for forgiveness for those who were doing it. And if every time you think about somebody, you just feel this sense of anger welling up inside, you need to intentionally stop. Look at them the way Christ would. And then you need to go on and think about something positive, because the more you let your mind dwell on that anger, the worse it's going to be. Anger can be a very, very damaging thing, do a lot more damage than what we realize. Now, on the opposite side of that, what honors God is a virtue called self-control. And he helps us with it. It's in self-control that we are free from the damaging effects of anger, and we are free to serve God. I just want to close with a proverb. Proverbs 16:32 says, whoever is slow to anger is better than the mighty, and he who rules his spirit than he who takes a city.